The transport shuttle docked at station with a soft hiss, and Lucy stepped onto the polished floors of the Galactic Academy for the first time. She was 17 years old, with brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail and eyes the color of storm clouds. She carried one small bag over her shoulder and wore the plain gray uniform that had been sent to her family home in Colorado 3 months ago. She did not smile as she walked through the arrival gate. She did not frown either. Her face was perfectly calm, perfectly still, like the surface of a frozen lake. The other students in the arrival hall stopped what they were doing. Conversations died. A group of tall, blue-skinned students backed away slowly. A small cluster of crystalline pressed themselves against the far wall. Someone whispered the word that Lucy had heard 100 times since she boarded the shuttle on Earth. Lucy kept walking. The academy was beautiful in a cold and sterile way. The walls were made of something that looked like white marble but felt slightly warm to the touch. The ceiling stretched high overhead, decorated with holographic displays showing the stars and planets of 1,000 different worlds. Everything was clean and bright, and designed for species that had never known hunger or war or the simple terror of a thunderstorm. Lucy looked at it all with quiet interest but said nothing. A tall figure approached her. He was one of the founding species of the Galactic Council, with pale lavender skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his face. He wore robes of deep purple that marked him as someone important. His name was Headmaster, and he looked at Lucy the way someone might look at a dangerous animal that had somehow wandered into their home. "You are the human," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," Lucy replied. Studied her for a long moment. His upper eyes blinked while his lower eyes remained fixed on her face. "You understand that you are the first of your kind to attend this academy. The council approved your application as a gesture of goodwill toward your species. Do not make us regret this decision." Lucy nodded once. "I understand. You will follow our rules. You will not engage in violence of any kind. You will not threaten other students. You will control whatever predatory instincts your biology has given you. Is this clear?" "Yes." Waited, perhaps expecting more. A defense, an argument, some flash of the famous human temper that the galactic news networks love to report on. But Lucy simply stood there, patient and unmoving, and eventually the headmaster turned away with a gesture that might have been frustration. "Your quarters are in the East Wing. Your roommates have been informed of your arrival." Lucy followed the directions on her through corridors that gradually emptied as she passed. Students pressed themselves into doorways. One small furry creature actually climbed the wall to get away from her. Lucy did not react. She had expected this. Her mother had prepared her for it during those long nights before she left Earth, holding her hands and explaining that the galaxy feared her people, that she would need to be stronger than the strongest person she knew just to survive. Her quarters were at the end of a long hallway. The door slid open to reveal a common room with 4 sleeping alcoves branching off from it. 3 of those alcoves were already decorated with personal items. The 4th was empty. Her roommates were waiting for her. There was a girl with sky-blue skin and nervous eyes. A boy whose crystalline body caught the light and scattered rainbows across the walls. And a small round creature covered in soft orange fur who Lucy did not recognize. None of them spoke. Lucy set her bag down in the empty alcove. "Hello," she said. "My name is Lucy." The girl made a sound that might have been a whimper. The boy's crystals began to vibrate with a high-pitched hum. The furry creature simply stared with wide, dark eyes that never blinked. "We have requested transfers," the boy said finally. His voice sounded like wind chimes. "We do not wish to share space with a—" Lucy looked at him. She looked at all of them, these children from worlds where the rain fell soft and gentle, where nothing had claws or teeth, where the very concept of a predator was something from ancient horror stories. They were afraid of her. Genuinely, deeply afraid. And she understood because she had read the galactic databases. She knew what they thought humans were. "I understand," she said quietly. "I hope your transfers are approved." She turned and began unpacking her bag. She had brought very little: some clothes, a photograph of her family, a small stone from the creek behind her grandmother's house. She placed each item carefully in her alcove while her roommates watched from as far away as they could manage. The next morning, Lucy woke alone. Her roommates had found somewhere else to sleep, leaving their belongings behind in their hurry to escape. Lucy, dressed in her uniform, ate a nutrition bar from her bag and walked to her first class. The whispers followed her everywhere. Predator, monster. Students pointed at her and spoke in languages she did not understand, though their tone needed no translation. A group of older students blocked her path in one corridor, forcing her to wait while they pretended not to see her. Lucy waited. When they finally moved, she continued on without a word. Her first class was Galactic History, taught by an elderly professor who looked at Lucy with something between curiosity and fear. The other students had arranged themselves as far from her empty seat as possible, creating a bubble of isolation around the human girl. That was when Lucy first saw. He was, but unlike the nervous boy from her quarters, he radiated confidence. His crystalline skin was deep violet, almost black, shot through with veins of gold that marked him as nobility. He sat in the center of a group of admirers, speaking loudly enough for the whole room to hear. "The council has lost its mind," he was saying. "Allowing us into our academy, humans are barely civilized. They evolved by killing everything around them. They eat the flesh of other creatures. They wage war against their own kind for sport." Several students made sounds of disgust. Others nodded in agreement. Turned his golden eyes toward Lucy. He smiled, showing teeth that were purely decorative, never having evolved for biting or tearing. "Tell me, human, is it true your species murdered its own planet, that you poisoned your air and water before the council found you?" Every eye in the room focused on Lucy. The professor said nothing, watching to see what they would do. Lucy looked at for a long moment. Her face revealed nothing. No anger, no shame, no fear. When she spoke, her voice was quiet and steady. "Earth is still alive," she said. "So are we." Then she turned to face the front of the classroom and waited for the lesson to begin. Stared at her, his crystalline features flickering with something that might have been surprise or irritation. He had expected a reaction: anger, defensiveness, something he could use against her. But the human girl sat perfectly still, perfectly calm, as if his words meant nothing at all. It was in that moment that decided Lucy needed to be taught her place. The campaign against Lucy began slowly, like poison spreading through water. It started with whispers that grew louder whenever she entered a room, and his followers made sure everyone heard the stories. Humans carried diseases that could melt flesh. Human breath was toxic to species with sensitive respiratory systems. Humans could not control their predatory urges and would attack without warning if they smelled blood. None of it was true. Lucy knew this because she had studied the medical reports before leaving Earth. Humans were actually remarkably compatible with most galactic species, but truth did not matter at the Galactic Academy. Fear was stronger than facts. The cafeteria was the worst. Lucy would enter with her tray of food, and the nearest tables would empty within seconds. Students grabbed their meals and hurried away, leaving a growing circle of isolation around wherever she chose to sit. The first day, she sat near the windows. The second day, she tried the center of the room. By the third day, she understood that it did not matter where she sat. The result would always be the same. She ate alone. Her coursework began disappearing from the academic system. Assignments she had submitted would vanish, leaving her with 0 marks and concerned messages from professors who wondered why she was not completing her work. Lucy simply did everything twice, keeping backup copies on her personal. When one assignment vanished, she submitted another. When that one vanished too, she submitted a third. Someone scratched words into her locker using acid. Filth. The letters were burned deep into the metal, impossible to remove. Lucy looked at them for exactly 3 seconds, then opened her locker and retrieved her books as if nothing had happened. Watched her constantly. He sat with his group of followers in the corridors between classes, loudly discussing humans and their primitive ways. He made sure Lucy could hear every word. He talked about human violence, human stupidity, human ugliness. He wondered aloud how such a species had ever achieved space travel. Perhaps they had stolen the technology from a civilized race. Lucy walked past without looking at him. Her face remained calm. Her steps remained steady. This made angry in ways he did not fully understand. One morning, Lucy found her quarters had been broken into. Her belongings were scattered across the floor. The photograph of her family had been torn into pieces. The small stone from her grandmother's creek was gone completely. Lucy knelt on the floor for a long time, looking at the torn pieces of the photograph. Her mother's face, ripped in half. Her father's smile, crumpled and creased. Her little brother making a funny face at the camera, now barely recognizable. She gathered the pieces carefully and placed them in a small box. Then she cleaned her quarters, made her bed, and went to class. A girl named watched all of this from a distance. She was not part of this group, but she was not brave enough to stand against them either. She had been raised on a world where conflict was handled through careful negotiation and polite disagreement. Violence was something from history books. Cruelty was something she had never encountered until she came to this academy and saw how students treated the human girl. Did not understand Lucy. She did not understand how someone could face such treatment and show nothing. No tears, no anger, no reaction at all. It frightened her almost as much as the stories about this ability to absorb pain without acknowledging it. The situation escalated during a philosophy lecture about cooperation. The professor, an ancient scholar who had lived for 300 years, was discussing the challenges of building trust between species with different evolutionary backgrounds. Raised his hand. Professor, how can there be cooperation when some species are inherently violent? Humans, for example. Their entire history is warfare. They competed for resources through bloodshed. They developed weapons before they developed medicine. How can such a species ever be trusted? The professor looked uncomfortable. Well, every species has its challenges in early development. The important thing is growth and change over time. But can they change? Pressed. Can a species bred for killing ever truly become peaceful? He turned to look directly at Lucy. Perhaps our human guest can explain. Tell us, how do your people plan to overcome your violent nature? The classroom fell silent. Everyone stared at Lucy. She stood slowly. Her movements were unhurried, deliberate. She faced with those calm gray eyes that revealed nothing of what she was thinking or feeling. We survived, she said. Blinked what? You asked how we overcame our nature. We did not overcome it. We survived it. We survived ice ages and plagues and famines. We survived predators that hunted us in the dark. We survived each other. Everything on Earth tried to kill us, and we are still here. She paused, and for just a moment something flickered in her eyes. Not anger, something deeper. Your worlds were kind to you. They gave you safety and comfort. They let you grow without struggle. My world gave us struggle every single day, and we grew anyway. That is not something to overcome. That is something to understand. She sat down. The classroom remained silent. The professor cleared his throat several times but seemed unable to find words. Stared at Lucy with an expression that mixed confusion and rage in equal measure. He had expected her to defend herself, to argue, to show some weakness he could exploit. Instead, she had simply stated facts and sat back down as if the conversation was over. For, watching from 3 rows back, something shifted in that moment. She began to see Lucy not as a monster from a death world, but as something else entirely. A survivor. Someone who had learned to face impossible odds and keep walking forward. After class, found herself following Lucy at a distance. She watched the human girl walk through corridors that emptied at her approach, watched her ignore the whispers and the stares, watched her sit alone in the library and study with the same quiet focus she brought to everything. Wanted to approach her. She wanted to say something kind, to offer some small gesture of friendship, but fear held her back. Fear of what others would think, fear of and his followers, fear of the unknown. So she watched from a distance, and she wondered what it would take for someone like Lucy to finally break. That night gathered his followers in his private quarters. His family's wealth gave him rooms 3 times the size of standard student housing, decorated with crystals from his that sang soft melodies when the light hit them. She thinks she is strong, said. She thinks her silence is power, but it is just stubbornness, stubbornness. What do you want us to do? One of his followers asked. Smiled, his decorative teeth caught the light of his crystals. Words have not worked. Perhaps it is time for action. The survival course is next week. That has a predator simulation zone. His followers exchanged nervous glances. It is only a simulation, assured them. Nothing that would actually harm her, but it will frighten her. It will show everyone that humans are not so different from the rest of us. They can be scared. They can be broken. He looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere among them was a small blue planet that had somehow produced this infuriating creature who would not react to anything he did. She will crack, he said softly. Everyone does eventually. There was the pride of the Galactic Academy. It covered nearly a quarter of station, a massive enclosed space that contained carefully designed environments from dozens of different worlds. Students used it for biology studies, ecological research, and survival training. Most of the environments were gentle places, filled with soft plants and harmless creatures that helped sheltered students understand the basics of planetary ecosystems. But there was one section that was different. The Predator Simulation Zone was designed to teach students from garden worlds what danger felt like. It lowered the oxygen levels slightly, introduced temperature fluctuations, and played the recorded sounds of predatory species through hidden speakers. For students who had never experienced threat, it was terrifying. For the instructors who monitored it, it was a controlled way to build character and resilience. The survival course began on a bright morning, with 30 students gathering at the entrance. Lucy stood at the back of the group, as far from the others as she could manage without leaving entirely. The instructor, a muscular named Counselor, explained the day's exercise. You will work in teams of 3, announced. Navigate through the forest environment, locate the beacon, and return before sunset. Simple enough for first-year students. Teams formed quickly. Lucy watched as students grouped together, carefully avoiding her eyes. When all the teams were set, she remained alone. Frowned, human, you will need a team. I can work alone, Lucy said. That is against protocol. Stepped forward, his violet crystals catching the light. Counselor, I will take responsibility for the human. She can join my team. Looked relieved. Excellent, proceed. Lucy followed and his 2 companions into the forest environment surrounded them immediately, tall trees with silver bark and leaves that glowed faintly blue. The air was warm and humid, filled with the sounds of artificial insects and distant bird calls. It was beautiful in a way that felt almost fake, too perfect to be real. They walked for an hour, led the way, speaking loudly to his companions about the proper techniques for wilderness navigation. Lucy followed several steps behind, saying nothing. She noticed things the others missed. The way the ground sloped slightly to the east, the patterns of light that indicated the direction of the artificial sun, the small stream that would eventually lead to lower ground where beacons were typically placed. When they reached a junction and the path stopped, the beacon should be this way, he said, pointing left. Lucy looked right, toward the stream. The beacon is more likely that direction. Turned to face her with a cold smile. Did I ask for your opinion? No. Then keep your mouth shut and follow." They went left. The path grew narrower, the trees pressing closer together. After another hour of walking, they reached a dead end at a cliff face covered in thick vines. Stared at the cliff for a long moment. Then he turned to his companions and spoke in a language Lucy did not understand. They nodded and began walking back the way they had come. "Where are you going?" Lucy asked. "Back to the entrance," replied. "This path was wrong. We will try another route." "I will continue alone." Smile widened. Of course, the independent human, always so confident. He gestured at the forest around them. "Good luck finding your way." They left. Lucy watched them go, then turned and began walking toward the stream she had noticed earlier. She moved quietly through the undergrowth, using skills her grandmother had taught her in the forests of Colorado. Track the water, follow the low ground, stay calm. She found the beacon an hour later, sitting in a small clearing by a pool of crystal-clear water. She activated it with her student identification and began walking back toward the entrance. That was when the world changed. The lights flickered. The warm air suddenly turned cold. The gentle sounds of the artificial forest were replaced by something else entirely. Low growls, heavy footsteps, the unmistakable audio of predators on the hunt. Lucy stopped. She recognized what was happening immediately. She had entered the predator simulation zone. The temperature dropped further. Her breath began to mist in the air. The oxygen level decreased just enough to make each breath feel slightly insufficient. Through the trees, she could see movement. Shadows that did not match any real creature, designed to trigger ancient fear responses in students who had never faced danger. Lucy sat down on a fallen log. She looked around the simulation zone with calm eyes. The cold was uncomfortable but manageable. Colorado winters had been worse. The low oxygen was noticeable but not dangerous. Her grandmother's house sat at 8,000 feet above sea level, where the air was even thinner than this. The predator sounds were loud and frightening, but they were just recordings. Nothing here could actually hurt her. She found a small stream nearby and drank from it. She gathered fallen branches and built a simple shelter against a rock face, creating a windbreak that would conserve her body heat. She collected leaves that looked dry and soft enough to provide insulation from the cold ground. Hours passed. The monitoring systems in the simulation zone tracked her vital signs and sent reports to the central computer. Heart rate, elevated but stable. Stress hormones, within normal range. Movement patterns, purposeful and organized. The human was not panicking. The human was not even particularly uncomfortable. 6 hours after she entered the zone, the emergency override finally activated. Counselor and 3 other instructors rushed in, expecting to find a traumatized student huddled in fear. Instead, they found Lucy sleeping peacefully in a shelter she had built herself, wrapped in layers of leaves like a cocoon. Shook her awake gently. "Student, are you injured?" Lucy opened her eyes and looked around. "No, is something wrong?" "You have been in the predator simulation zone for 6 hours. How did you end up here?" Lucy considered the question. "I must have taken a wrong turn after finding the beacon." Looked at her shelter. Looked at the stream where she had clearly been drinking. Looked at the small pile of edible plants she had gathered and set aside for later. "You survived 6 hours in conditions designed to break down the psychological defenses of our most prepared students. You did this while sleeping." "The conditions were not very challenging," Lucy said simply. "On Earth, this would be considered a nice camping spot. My grandmother used to take me places far worse when I was 8. She said it built character." Stared at her for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. It was not cruel laughter, but something closer to disbelief. "Your grandmother sounds like an interesting woman." "She was. She passed away 2 years ago." "I am sorry." "Thank you." They walked back through the together. Word of what had happened spread quickly through the student population. The human had been locked in the Predator simulation zone for 6 hours and had responded by taking a nap. The story grew with each retelling. Some said she had fought off the simulation predators with her bare hands. Others claimed she had actually enjoyed the experience. Found Lucy in the library that evening. The human girl was studying as always, her face calm and focused. "May I sit here?" asked. Lucy looked up. Her expression did not change, but she nodded. Sat down across from her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, then asked the question she had been holding inside for weeks. "How do you do it? How do you stay so calm when everything here is designed to break you?" Lucy set down her. She looked at with those gray eyes that seemed to see everything and reveal nothing. "On Earth," she said slowly, "there is no point in panicking. Panic does not stop the hurricane. It does not scare away the wolf. It does not make the winter shorter or the food more plentiful. My ancestors learned this a long time ago. The ones who panicked did not survive. The ones who stayed calm, who thought clearly, who did what needed to be done even when they were afraid, they lived. And they passed that ability on to their children." She picked up her again. "I am not calm because I am not afraid. I am calm because fear is not useful. It is just another feeling like hunger or tiredness. You acknowledge it and then you keep moving." Thought about this for a long time after Lucy left the library. She thought about her own world, where fear had never been necessary because danger had never existed. She thought about what it would mean to evolve on a planet where staying calm was the difference between life and death. And she began to understand, just a little, what it meant to be from a. The alarm began at 3 in the morning, station time. A high piercing wail that cut through the corridors of the Galactic Academy and dragged every student from their sleep. Emergency, lights flickered red in the darkness. Automated voices announced in 7 languages that all students should proceed immediately to designated shelter zones. Lucy was already moving before the announcement finished. She pulled on her uniform, grabbed her emergency kit, and stepped into the corridor. Other students were stumbling out of their quarters, confused and frightened, many still wearing sleep clothes. They looked at Lucy as she passed, and for once their expressions held something other than fear of her. They were afraid of something else now, something bigger. The station shuddered. A deep vibration ran through the floor and walls, followed by a distant sound like thunder. Lucy steadied herself against a wall and kept moving. She reached the central atrium just as Headmaster's voice came over the communication system. His normally calm tones were strained with barely controlled panic. "All students and staff, we have suffered a meteor impact on the eastern sector. Multiple atmospheric processors are offline. We are implementing emergency containment protocols. Remain calm and proceed to shelter zones." Lucy looked around the atrium. Students were clustering together in groups, holding on to each other, their various physiologies showing stress in different ways. They were vibrating so intensely they looked like they might shatter. The students had turned pale blue, their skin showing the fear they felt inside. The smaller species were crying openly, calling for parents who were light years away. The station shuddered again, harder this time. The lights went out completely. Emergency backup lighting flickered on, casting everything in a dim red glow. And then Lucy felt it. The change in air pressure. The slight difficulty in drawing breath. The atmospheric processors were failing, and oxygen levels were beginning to drop. A student collapsed. Then another. Species that required high oxygen levels were the first to fall, their bodies simply unable to function as the air thinned. Chaos erupted. Students screamed and pushed against each other, trying to reach the shelter zones, creating crushes at every doorway. Lucy stood still in the center of the chaos. She watched, she assessed, she made decisions. The shelter zones were overwhelmed. That was clear. But she remembered the station layout from her first day, when she had walked every corridor memorizing exits and alternatives. There were secondary emergency compartments in the maintenance sections. Smaller, but designed to operate independently if the main systems failed. They would have their own oxygen supplies. She began moving through the crowd, pushing against the flow. A girl stumbled and fell. Lucy caught her arm and pulled her up. "Follow me," she said. The girl nodded, too frightened to question. Lucy gathered more students as she went. A boy who could barely walk. Two small furry creatures whose species she still did not know. A crystalline whose body was beginning to crack in the cold. She half carried, half dragged them through corridors that grew darker and colder with every passing minute. The maintenance section was sealed. Lucy looked at the door for exactly 2 seconds, then ripped the emergency access panel from the wall. Her fingers found wires and switches that matched the basic engineering principles humans had developed centuries ago. Universal designs, it turned out. The door slid open. Inside, the secondary compartment hummed with life. Oxygen generators worked perfectly. Heat maintained comfortable levels. Lucy pushed her group inside and sealed the door behind them. "Stay here," she said. "You will be safe." "Where are you going?" the girl asked. "There are others." Lucy went back out into the failing station. She made 7 more trips over the next 4 hours. She carried students who could not walk. She guided groups through corridors that had lost all lighting, using nothing but her memory and her hands against the walls. She found a structural junction where a ventilation system had failed and spent 40 minutes making repairs with tools she fashioned from debris she found on the floor. Her body began to fail. The oxygen levels were now low enough to affect even human physiology. Her muscles burned with each movement. Her vision blurred at the edges. Her lungs worked harder and harder to pull useful air from the thinning atmosphere. She kept moving. The worst moment came when she found a group of students trapped beneath a collapsed ceiling beam. Their crystalline bodies were strong but brittle, unable to lift the weight pressing down on them. Lucy looked at the beam. It was heavy, too heavy for any reasonable person to move. She got beneath it anyway. She braced her legs against the floor and her back against the metal. She pushed. Something in her shoulder made a sound it should not have made. Pain exploded through her body, white and hot and overwhelming. She ignored it. She kept pushing. The beam moved an inch, 2 inches, enough for the students to crawl free. Lucy let the beam fall and collapsed against the wall. "You are injured," one of them said. "Yes." "Why did you do this? We have not been kind to you." Lucy looked at the student. Through the haze of pain and exhaustion, she recognized him. One of his followers. One of the ones who had whispered about her in the corridors and laughed when her coursework disappeared. "Because you needed help," she said. "That is reason enough." She stood up, using the wall for support, and led them to the nearest safe zone. By the time the emergency response teams finally stabilized the station's atmosphere, Lucy had helped save 43 students. She had operated for 4 hours on oxygen levels that should have rendered her unconscious in 20 minutes. Her shoulder was dislocated. Her hands were bleeding from a dozen cuts. She had not slept in 30 hours. The medical teams found her sitting in a corridor, leaning against a wall with her eyes closed. Her chest rose and fell with slow, deliberate breaths. Even now, even with her body broken and exhausted, her face remained calm. Pushed through the crowd of medical personnel and dropped to her knees beside Lucy. "Lucy, Lucy, can you hear me?" Lucy opened her eyes. "The medics are here. They are going to help you." "Good. You saved so many people. Students who treated you terribly. Students who wanted you gone." Lucy looked at with those gray eyes that had seen so much and revealed so little. "On Earth," she said quietly, "we have a saying. When the storm comes, you do not ask who deserves shelter. You just open the door." A medic gently moved aside and began treating Lucy's injuries. Watched as they reset her shoulder, as they cleaned and bandaged her hands, as they gave her oxygen and fluids and medication for the pain. Through it all, Lucy did not make a sound. She simply breathed, slow and steady, and waited for her body to heal. In another part of the station, sat in a shelter zone surrounded by students he had once called followers. They were not looking at him. They were talking about the human girl who had carried their friends to safety. They were talking about how she had lifted a beam that three could not move. They were talking about how she had kept going when everyone else had given up. Said nothing. His crystalline body had begun to crack during the crisis, and although the medics had stabilized him, the cracks remained, visible lines of weakness that would take weeks to heal. He thought about the human girl, about her calm face and steady hands, about the way she had looked at his follower and said that helping was reason enough. He thought about all the things he had done to her, and for the first time in his life, felt something he did not recognize. It took him a long time to realize it was shame. The academy changed after the crisis. It happened slowly at first, like dawn breaking over a dark horizon. Students who had once fled from Lucy now nodded at her in the corridors. Some even said hello. The circle of isolation that had surrounded her for months began to shrink, replaced by something that looked almost like acceptance. Lucy noticed the change but did not comment on it. She continued attending classes, completing assignments, eating meals in the cafeteria. The only difference now was that the tables around her did not empty quite so quickly. Sometimes other students even sat nearby, keeping a respectful distance but no longer running away in fear. Became her constant companion. The girl attached herself to Lucy with a determination that surprised everyone, including herself. She asked questions about Earth, about human history, about the grandmother who had taught Lucy to survive in the wilderness. Lucy answered patiently, in her quiet and steady way. "Tell me about Colorado," said one afternoon as they studied together in the library. "It is a place of mountains," Lucy said. "High peaks covered in snow, forests that stretch for hundreds of miles, rivers that run cold and fast over smooth stones." "It sounds beautiful." It is also dangerous. Blizzards can kill you in an hour if you are not prepared. Mountain lions hunt in the forests. Bears wake hungry in spring. Lucy paused. "My grandmother grew up in those mountains. She taught me everything she knew before she died." "You miss her?" "Every day." Reached across the table and touched Lucy's hand. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Lucy looked at their hands together, human skin against blue, and for just a moment something flickered in her eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly. The Academy Board held an inquiry into the meteor incident. They reviewed security footage, interviewed survivors, and examined every detail of how a simple meteor shower had nearly destroyed the entire station. What they found surprised no one who had been paying attention. Lucy had saved 43 lives. She had operated in conditions that would have killed most species within minutes. She had asked for nothing in return and had made no demands for recognition or reward. But they also found something else. Security footage showed and his companions leaving Lucy alone on the day of the survival course. Communications records revealed that someone had the safety systems to keep her in the Predator simulation zone. The evidence pointed directly to. He was called before the Academy Board on a cold morning 3 weeks after the crisis. His family's lawyers were present. His father, a wealthy crystalline merchant who had funded the construction of 3 academy buildings, sat in the observer gallery with an expression of controlled fury. Stood before the board and listened as they read the charges against him, endangering a fellow student, deliberately bypassing safety protocols, creating conditions that could have caused serious harm or death. When they asked if he had anything to say in his defense, he remained silent for a long time. Then he said something no one expected. "I was wrong." The room went still. His father leaned forward in his seat. The lawyers exchanged confused glances. "I was wrong about humans," continued. His voice was steady, but there was something different in it now. something that sounded almost like humility. I was wrong about Lucy. I believed the stories my culture taught me about. I believed they were primitive and violent and dangerous. I believed that fear was the only language they understood. He paused. The cracks in his crystalline body caught the light, visible reminders of his own fragility. But when the station was failing, when everyone was afraid, she did not panic. She did not think about who had treated her well and who had treated her badly. She just helped. She carried people who could barely walk. She saved lives without asking for anything in return, including mine. His followers had told him the story, how Lucy had found him unconscious in a corridor and carried him to a safe zone even though he weighed twice as much as she did. How she had refused to leave him behind even when the oxygen levels dropped to dangerous levels. I do not ask for forgiveness, said. I do not deserve it, but I want the board to know that I understand now. Strength is not about power or status or the ability to make others fear you. True strength is doing what needs to be done, even when it is hard, even when no one will thank you for it. He looked directly at the camera that was broadcasting the hearing to the rest of the station. Somewhere out there, Lucy was watching. I am sorry, he said, for everything. The board expelled him anyway. His father's money could not protect him from the consequences of his actions. But before he left the station, he found Lucy in the gardens near the observation deck. She was sitting alone, looking out at the stars. The view was beautiful from here, thousands of points of light scattered across the velvet darkness of space. Approach slowly. May I speak with you? Lucy turned. Her face showed nothing as always. Yes. He sat down a respectful distance away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. I came to apologize in person, he said finally. Not because the board told me to, because I want to. I heard your testimony. Did you believe it? Lucy considered the question. I believe you meant what you said. Whether you will remember it in a year, I do not know. People often make promises in moments of emotion that they forget when life returns to normal. Nodded, that is fair. I have not earned your trust. No, you have not. Another silence. The stars turned slowly beyond the observation windows. Can I ask you something? Said. Yes. During the crisis when you found me in that corridor, you could have left me there. After everything I did to you, no one would have blamed you. Why did you save me? Lucy looked at him. Her gray eyes were calm and clear, holding no anger and no resentment, just quiet understanding of the universe and her place in it. Fear made you cruel, she said. Understanding will make you better. Go home and learn the difference. Sat with those words for a long time after she left. He thought about his world, where everything was smooth and safe and comfortable. He thought about Earth, with its storms and predators and endless challenges. He thought about what it would mean to grow up on a planet that was constantly trying to kill you, and how that might shape a person. He left the station the next morning, but he never forgot what the human girl taught him. 3 months later, Lucy was called to headmaster's office. She expected another routine meeting about her academic progress or integration status. Instead, she found the headmaster standing by his window, looking out at the stars with an expression she had never seen on him before. Sit down, miss. She sat, turned to face her. The academy was wrong about humans. I was wrong about humans. I treated you as a threat to be managed rather than a student to be educated. I apologize. Lucy nodded. Thank you. May I ask you something personal? Yes. What did Earth teach you that made you so resilient? How does one planet produce someone who can face everything you have faced and remain so steady? Lucy thought about the question. She thought about her grandmother's house in the mountains, about the long winters and the howling storms, about the wolves that sang at night and the bears that wandered through the yard in spring. She thought about her mother holding her hands before she left Earth, telling her to be strong. And for the first time since she arrived at the Galactic Academy, Lucy smiled. It was a small smile, barely more than a slight curve of her lips, but it transformed her face. It made her look young and hopeful and impossibly human. Earth taught me that the universe does not care if you are afraid, she said. It does not care if you are angry or sad or lonely. It just keeps moving. So you learn to keep moving with it. You learn that your feelings are real, but they do not have to control you. You learn that survival is not about being the strongest or the fastest. It is about being steady when everything else is falling apart. Listened in silence. My grandmother used to say that the mountains do not care if you are ready for them. They just are. And you can either learn to climb, or you can stay at the bottom and wonder what is at the top. She stood. I chose to climb. Later that evening, Lucy walked through the academy corridors. Students still looked at her as she passed, but the fear was gone. Now there was curiosity, respect, even admiration. Fell into step beside her, as she did every day now. "What are you thinking about?" asked. Lucy looked out at the vast through the observation windows. Somewhere out there, a small blue planet orbited an average yellow star. A planet of hurricanes and earthquakes, of predators and disease, of war and hardship. A planet that taught one quiet girl that strength was not about what you showed the world. It was about what you carried inside. "I am thinking," Lucy said, "that it is good to be home." Looked confused. "This is not Earth." Lucy smiled again, that small quiet smile that revealed more than her calm face ever had. "Home is not a place," she said. "Home is people who understand you, people who see who you really are and choose to stand beside you anyway." She looked at. "I have that now." They walked together through the corridors of the Galactic Academy, a human girl and her alien friend, heading toward a future that neither of them could predict, but both of them were ready to face. Together,